For settlers in the American Southwest during the mid to late 1800s, survival was a relentless challenge. The expansion into territories occupied by Native American tribes like the Apache came at a steep price. Known for their unforgiving raiding strategies and mastery of the land, the Apache carved out a reputation as one of the fiercest and most effective raiding societies in American history. Skilled in stealth, they could strike quickly and vanish before anyone realized they'd been there. This power over the land and the people who crossed it made them both feared and admired. Settlers who ventured into Apache territory knew they were taking a gamble. Survival often depended on sheer luck. Those who made it through an Apache raid unscathed were few and far between, but for many, the cost was far more severe. The Apache's need to sustain their population and protect their people from harsh conditions and high mortality led to a common raiding practice. The abduction of children, both as a survival tactic and a cultural necessity. The stories of Mickey Free and Charlie McComas are among the most significant and tragic examples of this practice, casting a lasting shadow over the American frontier. In sharing these stories, I aim to bring historical events to life by delving into the motivations, emotions, and consequences that shape them. If history fascinates you as much as it does me, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support helps grow the channel and brings more content to curious minds now. Let's explore these stories, beginning with the tale of Mickey Free, whose kidnapping sparked one of the longest conflicts between Native Americans and the U.S. government. Mickey Free, later a famed Apache scout, wasn't born into the Apache community. Born Felix Ward, he was the son of a rancher in Arizona's Kanawha Valley. His abduction in 1861 marked a turning point in frontier relations, setting off the 25-year-long Apache Wars. At just 13, Felix was living a life typical of young settlers, working on the ranch and playing outdoors when possible. Yet even at his young age, he was no stranger to the Apache, who had raided his family's ranch multiple times, taking cattle and other valuables. Felix, however, wasn't prepared for the day he would be taken to. The Apache raid that captured Felix wasn't an isolated act of violence. Raiding was deeply woven into Apache culture, serving not just as a means of survival, but as a strategic way of asserting dominance and securing resources. Raids allowed the Apache to supplement what they couldn't obtain through trade or on their land, especially after the arrival of settlers who competed for the same resources. Additionally, Apache warriors believed that adopting captives into the tribe could strengthen their community and provide future warriors or brides who could contribute to the Apache lineage. In the case of young male captives like Felix, survival was rare. Teenage boys and men were often killed, immediately viewed as threats due to their physical maturity and presumed loyalty to their original community. However, Felix's slight build and poor eyesight, due to an infection that left him blind in one eye, as an infant, may have saved him, as he appeared younger and weaker than most boys his age. The Apache who captured Felix may have felt a kinship toward him. The chief of the group, also blind in one eye, allegedly felt pity for Felix, sparing his life despite the prevailing cultural norms. This act of mercy, however, didn't guarantee Felix's future safety. As he was sold to another band a few weeks later, his fate lay in the hands of the Cayutero Apache, who adopted him into their community. For Felix, life as an adopted Apache child would have been both bewildering and grueling. Yet it also provided him with the survival and endurance that would later make him one of the most formidable scouts in American history. When John Ward, Felix's stepfather, returned from a trip to discover his stepson missing, he immediately sought the help of the U.S. military. Fort Buchanan, the nearest military post, dispatched Lieutenant George Bascom and 54 soldiers to find Felix and bring him back. Bascom's response was swift but tragically misguided. He followed the trail eastward, convinced that the Chiricahua Apache had taken Felix, since they occupied territory near where the raid had taken place. This assumption proved disastrous. The Chiricahua, led by the influential Chief Cochise, had not been involved in the raid. Nevertheless, Bascom insisted that Cochise return the boy, arresting members of Cochise's family to force his compliance. Cochise, determined to avoid conflict, attempted to reason with Bascom, even offering to help track down the actual captors. But Bascom, unwilling to negotiate, only fueled tensions by accusing Cochise and taking his family hostage. In response, Cochise captured several settlers, proposing a hostage exchange that Bascom also refused. With diplomatic options exhausted, Cochise staged a daring escape, slicing through the tent canvas to flee with his warriors into the mountains. His relatives were not so fortunate, and Bascom retaliated by hanging Cochise's family. This marked the beginning of the Apache Wars, a conflict that lasted more than 2 decades, largely ignited by Felix Ward's abduction. Meanwhile, Felix's life had transformed radically. Now with the Cayutero Apache, he was known as Mickey, free and integrated fully into Apache society. His adoptive brother John Rope, who would later become a renowned Apache scout, described Mickey as one of us. Mickey's new life included joining in raids and learning Apache survival tactics. As an outsider, though, he would have faced his own unique challenges. His unfamiliarity with the Apache language and customs, combined with his physical differences, may have initially set him apart. Yet over time he earned the respect of his community. When U.S. forces eventually confined the Apache to reservations, the captives were usually released back to their families. However, by this time Felix's original family had died, and his only living relative, his brother Santiago, failed to persuade him to leave his adoptive community. Instead, Mickey remained with the Apache and became an invaluable scout for the U.S. Army. Serving under General George Crook, his bilingual abilities and cultural insight made him indispensable in tracking and negotiating with Apache groups, though his loyalties often placed him in precarious positions. The military renamed him Mickey Free, after a one-eyed Irish character from a popular novel of the time. Despite his ambiguous ethnic origins, likely a mix of Mexican and Irish heritage, Mickey's striking appearance, red-brown hair and one blind eye, made him a recognizable figure among both soldiers and Apache. Mickey's role as a scout was essential, yet conflicted. The Apache viewed his work for the military with suspicion, particularly the Chiricahua, who saw his actions as betrayals. Mickey's pragmatic approach to his position often left him isolated, as he was neither fully Apache nor fully aligned with the U.S. soldiers. His dedication to his work, however, never wavered. Known for his courage, he would often run into dangerous situations to negotiate with hostile groups, mid-conflict, earning both admiration and resentment. In 1885, Mickey Free's loyalty was again put to the test when the renowned Apache leader, Geronimo, led a breakout from the San Carlos Reservation. He blamed Mickey for the escape, believing that his presence as a scout contributed to the military's ability to confine the Apache. The American government shared this sentiment, suspecting that Mickey had indirectly instigated the rebellion by intensifying tensions. Nonetheless, Mickey continued to work as a scout, bridging two worlds that were perpetually at odds. The second story, that of Charlie McComas, represents a different yet equally tragic experience of capture. Charlie, a young boy, was taken in the 1880s, a period when the Apache raids had intensified as their traditional way of life came under increasing pressure from American settlers and soldiers. The specifics of his abduction are shrouded in mystery, with conflicting accounts about his fate. Some claim he was killed during a skirmish shortly after his capture. Others suggest he was taken deeper into Apache territory and integrated into a tribe. His story remains one of the great mysteries of the Apache Wars, symbolizing the unresolved suffering of both settlers and Native Americans caught in the relentless struggle over the land. Charlie's disappearance devastated his family, and his story, though largely forgotten today, was emblematic of the countless families who lost loved ones in the westward expansion. The Apache had their own narrative, viewing these abductions not as acts of cruelty, but as means of cultural survival. In the face of dwindling resources and increasing hostilities, the Apache relied on these captives not only for population growth, but also as a method of cultural preservation, as children could be taught Apache ways and help continue the tribe's lineage. Both Mickey Free and Charlie McComas were drawn into an era of extreme conflict, embodying the struggles between settlers and Native Americans in the Southwest. For Mickey, his life as a scout created a unique legacy, as both a revered and controversial figure. In navigating the demands of two contrasting cultures, he represented the enduring resilience of those caught between worlds. His survival adaptability and skill made him an exceptional scout, and a symbol of the complex relationships that define the frontier. The Apache Wars left scars on both sides, with untold stories of loss, courage, and resilience. Mickey Free and Charlie McComas are two names among many who were drawn into a world shaped by conflict and survival. Their lives remind us that history is not just a story of dates and places, but of people, each with their own unique journey. Caught in the tides of change, the intricate story of Mickey Free and the Apaches weaves together threads of cultural collision, fierce independence, and deeply personal vendettas. Mickey, a half-Irish, half-Mexican scout with no formal allegiance to any group, found himself at the center of some of the most heated struggles between the U.S. government and the Apache people. He often arrested Apaches for drinking alcohol, strictly prohibited by reservation laws, and for domestic violence, a practice that, according to Apache tradition, wasn't considered a legal offense. For the Apache, such practices were not criminal, but part of cultural norms that their new lives on reservations forced them to question. Nana, a prominent Apache chief, bluntly defended his people against these new regulations when the U.S. promised the Apaches protection and freedom from prosecution for such offenses. On the reservation, they hadn't foreseen how differently cultural norms would interpret legal boundaries. Too many. Nana's argument may seem morally complex, even shocking, yet seen through the lens of Apache culture, Nana's perspective was logical, as his people had long adhered to a distinct legal system that clashed with Anglo-American norms. Despite these agreements, social issues, including domestic violence, ran rampant on the reservation, frequently tied to the Apaches' consumption of their homemade alcoholic drink tiswin. Tensions mounted, eventually reaching a boiling point. In May of that year, 150 Apaches, led by the infamous Geronimo, broke out of the San Carlos reservation and fled south into Mexico. The group's escape triggered a massive, multi-agency manhunt that spanned hundreds of miles and dragged on for months. As a scout and interpreter for the military, Mickey Free took on a critical role in the pursuit, helping track down Geronimo's elusive band and communicate with Apache allies and defectors. His language skills and cultural familiarity made him invaluable. On several occasions, the military closed in on Geronimo and nearly achieved a surrender. However, the complex web of mistrust, fueled by alcohol and misunderstanding, ultimately prevented any peaceful resolution. Tragically, Captain Emmett Crawford, one of the leading officers in the campaign, was killed during this pursuit, an event that signaled the beginning of the end for General George Crook's control over the Apache Wars. Crook's replacement, General Nelson Miles, took a different approach, avoiding aggressive tactics and limiting his use of scouts like Mickey Free. This left Mickey in a state of uncertainty until he was sent to Washington, D.C., where he served as an interpreter in negotiations with Apache representatives. In July 1886, Mickey, along with a small delegation of Apache, made the trip to the nation's capital. Washington hoped to use interpreters like Mickey to facilitate communications with Geronimo and other Apache leaders via telegraph. Once they were captured, among these interpreters was a scout named Cheto, a former raider whose story would intertwine with Mickey's in unexpected ways. Communication during this time was notoriously unreliable, especially given the broken telegraph lines that plagued the U.S. military and government's efforts. Despite these challenges, by September of that year, Geronimo and his band ultimately surrendered. This surrender marked a monumental moment in Apache history. Government, fearing continued resistance, deemed the Chiricahua too dangerous to hold in a standard prison or to return to the reservation at San Carlos. Instead, they were sent to a more secure facility in Florida, a place chosen to prevent any chance of escape or rebellion. Even loyal Apache scouts like Cheto, who had worked alongside the military, were considered potentially dangerous and were shipped off to Florida along with the others. This decision left a bitter mark on the Apache's memory and served as a lasting symbol of the mistrust and betrayal that characterized so much of their relationship with the U.S. government. Mickey Free made one last trip as an interpreter to Fort Marion in Florida, where he stayed for about a month, translating and witnessing the formal conclusion of the conflict that had defined his life. His unique story began decades earlier when he was captured as a young boy named Felix Ward and raised by Apaches, becoming known as Mickey Free. Yet despite his central role in the Apache Wars, Mickey remained a largely enigmatic figure. Since he never learned to read or write, no first-hand accounts of his experiences survive. Consequently, his story and his thoughts on these momentous events remain a mystery, known only through the memories and records of others. One of the many unresolved stories from this era occurred years after the Apache Wars seemingly ended. In 1924, in an unexpected twist, the Bronco Apache, an isolated group of Apache who continued to resist life on reservations, staged what would be the last recorded Apache raid on American soil. This raid occurred in New Mexico, where the Bronco Apache attacked a ranch, killing a local rancher and seizing livestock and supplies. After the raid, witnesses reported seeing a mysterious figure, a white-bearded man on horseback, riding with the Apache raiders. The question immediately arose: who was this white Apache? Speculation abounded, with some suggesting it might have been Charlie McComas, a child captured by Apache decades earlier. Charlie McComas's story had begun in March 1883. His family was enjoying a picnic near Thompson Canyon, a narrow passage that funneled travelers along a single road. Unbeknownst to them, a small Apache raiding party led by Chetto lay in wait, anticipating travelers who would inevitably cross their path. When the Apaches attacked, Charlie's father, Hamilton McComas, attempted to defend his family. Hamilton handed the reins of their wagon to his wife. Juniana grabbed his rifle and prepared to fight. Tragically, he was no match for the ambush. His body was found riddled with bullets. Juniana, clutching Charlie, tried to flee, but the Apaches caught up with them. She was killed, likely with a rifle butt, as Charlie was seized and taken prisoner. By the time local residents and military personnel responded, the raiders had vanished, slipping across the Mexican border, where U.S. forces were prohibited from pursuing them. This tactic of border hopping had long frustrated American efforts to track and capture Apache raiders. However, a new international treaty, passed just 2 months after Charlie's capture, granted U.S. forces the right to cross the border. In pursuit of hostile Apache groups, General Crook quickly mobilized, launching an expedition to locate Charlie and punish the raiders. This mission included Apache scouts, indispensable in tracking their kin through rugged, unforgiving terrain. Mickey Free, now a seasoned scout, was among the leaders. The campaign eventually brought the U.S. forces to Chetto's Rancheria, resulting in a violent skirmish. 9 Apaches were killed and 5 were taken prisoner, including women and elderly individuals. During questioning, one woman claimed that Charlie had been hidden away when the scouts first approached. However, despite ongoing searches, Charlie was never found, and reports varied wildly. Some Apaches suggested he had escaped during the chaos, fleeing into the mountains, where thick brush and torrential rains erased his tracks. One officer, John G. Burke, recounted this in his book, An Apache Campaign in the Sierra Madre, voicing his own suspicions. The Chiricahua claimed that Charlie had vanished into the wilderness, yet Burke doubted their story, given the suspicious circumstances and the Apaches' history of misleading their pursuers. Still, the search yielded nothing, leaving Charlie's fate uncertain. Years later, another narrative emerged, adding another layer to the mystery. Jason Betsinas, an Apache who fought alongside Geronimo, wrote in his memoir, The First Fought with Geronimo, that Charlie had been adopted by an Apache family, becoming fluent in their language and gradually integrated into their culture. In a tragic turn, however, Charlie's life ended in a violent outburst. When Apache scouts attacked Chetto's Rancheria, a warrior named Speedy discovered his mother had been killed in the crossfire. Enraged, Speedy reportedly bludgeoned young Charlie to death with a rock. Betsinas claimed he was not present during the incident, but heard it from an eyewitness named Ramona. Although he believed the story to be true, he chose to withhold it until all involved had passed away, fearing retribution or renewed animosity. However, there remained one final possibility, one that fueled speculation for decades. While most Apache had been relegated to reservations by the late 1880s isolated groups, known as the Bronco Apache, continued living independently in Mexico's Sierra Madre Mountains. Over the years, rumors surfaced about a mysterious white man, described as bearded and distinctly non-Apache, living among the Bronco Apache. These sightings span decades, with stories emerging as late as 1924 when a white man was reportedly seen among the Apache raiders in New Mexico. Another report from 1930 described a Mexican village attacked by Broncos who included the same enigmatic figure. In 1940, a captured Apache woman claimed that this white, bearded man had recently been killed in a dispute over a woman. She directed archaeologists to his burial site, where they exhumed the remains of a man with blue eyes and red hair, a striking resemblance to Charlie McComas. The discovery added another layer of mystery, leaving historians and enthusiasts alike to wonder, had Charlie somehow survived, living out his life as an Apache warrior? Or was the body that of another mysterious figure, who had likewise chosen a life outside the boundaries of American society? As for Mickey Free, his life after the wars faded into relative obscurity. His enigmatic story captured the attention of a few historians and enthusiasts, but he never shared the details of his experiences, taking the secrets of a lifetime spent on the razor's edge between cultures to his grave. For the Apaches and Americans of the Southwest, the tale of Mickey Free, Charlie McComas, and the others involved in these conflicts offers a haunting reminder of the human costs and cultural misunderstandings that defined the American frontier. If you found this story captivating, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I delve deep into lesser-known histories, unraveling tales that often lie hidden beneath popular accounts. Share any thoughts or topic requests below. Every suggestion helps bring these forgotten stories to light.